And when did you when did you get into like creating the dub sounds?
When I started on the keyboard, basically.
You did. I can remember you getting a keyboard.
It was like a Moog Rogue.
Yeah, little one.
Yeah, they're amazing. Yeah. So good. So I did that, and I was like, "There's got to be a way of translating this to live."
I can remember you shedding your keys chops.
Yeah, that was the vibe.
That was in Leeds, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I like learned the logistics of how synths work.
Yeah.
And I was like, "There's got to be a way of then translating that." But the problem was there just wasn't that many things around that could track very well. Yeah. You know, a lot of them would be really glitchy. Yeah. And when you're playing the dub sort of stuff, because it's so loud, the last thing you want is some like massive glitch to come screaming through a PA. So the best thing, I used to be in this metal band in Leeds called White Boys for Gay Jesus.
Nice.
They were a
good
pretty
name.
Very great name. And the guitar player from that bought a Line 6 M9 and had a go on it after rehearsal one day. And there was a synth setting. Bass is so smooth, tracked amazingly. I was like, oh my God, I've got to get it.
It was the guitar version, yeah.
Well, yeah, it's just a guitar. I think it was mainly for guitars. So I've basically always stuck with Line 6. Tracking's amazing. And you can automate every single parameter with your feet, which is the main thing, creating lines and making them interesting.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to be able to, playing wise, well, a lot of the electronic stuff is so simple, but it's like creating, you know, modulating the stuff while you're playing, which you can do with your feet. So being able to manipulate the sounds while you're playing with your feet is the one.
Yeah. Because I think what's really interesting about you, man, is that there was nobody doing it when you started doing it. You know, so there was actually nobody to copy.
Yeah, just kind of messed around.
You know what I mean? There's actually nobody to be like, oh, because it's super. You know, I'm into sort of like R&D instead of research and development. I'm like rip off and duplicate. You know, I'm like, just, you know, if you want to get that sound, just like go after that sound. But for you, there wasn't any. You were like listening to keys players or programming and then
translating it to the pedals.
bass. Yeah. Was that just like a massive learning curve?
It was, yeah. And the best bit about it was in Submotion Orchestra, the producer, he's called Dom. His Ruckspins is producing now. Yeah. And he writes incredible, like, cinematic kind of dubstep electronic music, basically. And he basically just taught me, like, I was like, how does that make that sound? And he's like, oh, well, I split the signal, I put parallel compression on this, if I open up this filter, it'll do this. So I was, like, writing all these things down. These, like, producing chops, basically.
Yeah.
And I was like, how am I going to then do that on a pedal board? And luckily, because a lot of it that I found out is automation, that's why the Line 6 stuff's amazing, because you can automate with your feet. So instead of like obviously drawing crazy lines in Pro Tools or whatever, you can just do it with your feet.
You can do it with your feet,
Yeah. So I was like, oh, you open the cutoff here. If you get it to this point, you add this amount of reverb. Once that opens out, you know, and like learning and then moving things about. Obviously, like the way you put it in the chains, the chain of everything's quite important as well.
How long did it take you to get that like developed? Do you know, so you could be like, I can do it, I'm confident with it. I'm going to go and sort of like work with this producer, I'm turning up with my stuff, and I know that I'm going to be able to, you know,
do it.
I'm going to be able to do this.
It was a good couple of years. Yeah, because a lot of the stuff I still didn't know how to do. It's the same as shedding. If you're working on chops or whatever, it's like the same thing as like building up this palette of sounds. Someone goes, you know, when I first started, I'd go in, say, with a drum and bass producer, be like, can you play as a Reese? You know, and I was like, oh, how do you do that? And then you research it and you find out that it's actually two oscillators, you detune them slightly by the same amount, creates a natural blah, 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 you know. And then
how are you finding out stuff like that? Just search on the internet?
Yeah, or asking producers. That was the thing. It was like a totally separate thing to like at the musician side of things, you know.
It's like a completely different instrument.
Yeah, basically.
It's like sort of like you're getting the bass and you're hooking up with this other instrument to create
totally.
Sort of
something
like
completely different.
Yeah. So it was a couple of years before you sort of like you felt really comfortable with it.
Yeah, and I knew I could go into a situation, they'd be like, can you give me this, this and this and this? And I'd be like, I could dial it up because I had X amount of patches that I could just go back to, maybe manipulate a little bit so it'd suit the track. But then you have this, you know.
And what was your sort of like platform of getting all that stuff out? Was it Submotion? Was that the kind of...
Yeah.
Because obviously, like if you think about it, like imagine this is like all the stuff that we're talking about. Imagine if it was like an instrument. You kind of have to use the instrument to sort of like get your chops together. So did you get your chops together doing all that stuff with Submotion?
Yeah, basically, yeah. And listening to that sort of music religiously as well. And going to the raves and seeing what went down well, you know, you could go to Subdub or Vagabonds and these nights that were happening.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'd be a geek. I'd be sat there soaking it up and being like, everyone's gone mental because of that drop. How come that happens with that? And it would, I'd actually analyse. Obviously, I'd have a good time.
Were you finding the tracks?
Say again.
Were you finding the tracks that they were playing?
Yeah. I'd just like soak up that scene because
But you were having a good time at the same time.
Oh, amazing! Yeah,
you weren't
great.
You didn't have a notepad.
No, not like that.
Come and dance.
Yeah,
No.
I need to find out how he opens his oscillator on this one. It wasn't like that, but it was still good. You know, it was like certain things. I'd be like, I just get to know how, you know, certain things would work because it can be the most simplest thing as well.
Yeah.
That would work.
I want to talk about the Alex Clare thing.